Hello, and welcome to Last Place Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Traver, and this is my co host, Josh Richter. Go ahead and take it away from here, Josh.
So we are going to be talking about, the NFL offseason. So what that includes is just new coaches, new players, and we're going to talk about some of the trades that have happened during this offseason. Uh, Honestly, it was a pretty eventful offseason for the most part. If anything, like this is
No
probably
joke.
one of the first years where it felt like football was 24/7 because anything could have happened.
Yeah, it was a very eventful offseason. Just a lot of movement, to be honest. Like a lot of trades, a lot of free agency moves. So I'm excited to get into it and start
Yes.
talking about it. So we both made lists of our top five free agent pickups. We're gonna start with number five. Take off with my number five and do John Johnson the third, moving from the Browns to the Rams. Honestly, I think this is a great move for him and great move for the Browns.
Signed with the
He,
Browns for about a 3-year deal. Is that about right?
yeah, yeah. I don't have the details of his contract with him, but like just the move going from the Browns to the Rams, it's going to be pretty good.
He was the captain of that Rams defense last year, and like he really got the secondary just like all aligned and everything. Because if a lot of people forget, like it used to be Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, Lamarcus Joyner, John Johnson, and really the only reason I would say they really stayed consistent up top is obviously Jalen Ramsey on one side. But for everyone else, it was definitely John Johnson keeping everything there. It was one of
Yeah,
those moves where you went, oh, that's a big move. And it didn't get nearly the hype it deserves. Honestly, you
yeah,
put that on the list like 2 days ago, and I was like, why did I not think of that sooner? Because that's such a good pick. And I
yeah,
especially like, I mean, let's think of it from a Browns perspective. Like
yeah.
you have Grant Delpit, Greedy Williams, you have Denzel Ward, you have
Denzel Ward, man.
and
Yeah.
and I'll be honest, like I mean, I think one of their safeties is, you should know him, Andrew Sandejo, and
Mhm.
overall, I think we can say they were good, but I think John Johnson's going to take them to elite, and that kind of scares me.
Yeah, the tandem from Denzel Ward and John Johnson is just going to be dangerous. It's going to be a dangerous pair. Sorry, I correcting myself. He went from the Rams to the Browns, not from the Browns to the Rams. My bad. But yeah, I think that tandem between Denzel Ward and him are just going to be very dangerous. So I think their passing game, like passing defense, is going to be just that much better. So,
How much better? Like, where would you put them as far as your defense rankings when it
ooh,
comes to fantasy? Because I think it's
see it,
fair
it
to
it
say
puts him
top
up
10.
there. Yeah, it probably puts him. Definitely puts him in the top half of the NFL. Maybe even the top 10. Um, it's just really too early to see because they're both individually good players, and really it's an overall a great defense. But we'll see how John Johnson fits in that defense and
Yeah,
how he
that's
really like pairs with it, because you can put players together and they may just not click, you know. So who knows? It could go either way for them, but I think the addition of John Johnson onto that defense I think, is a step in the right direction. So
I think definitely like he played in the Wade Phillips system, then he played into Brandon Staley for last year, and so I think without a doubt, like he's able to play different like schemes really well, and he's able to excel in both. So I think he'll have no problem excelling. I think that's where I mean we'll talk about this later. As far as the coaching for the Browns is like, can they use their talent as best as they could
yeah, yeah,
or
I
as best as
agree.
they can? So I'm gonna go and hit my number five, and I got Mr. Will Fuller, who signed a 1-year deal, surprisingly, with the Miami Dolphins, and I believe it's for about 10 million, if I'm not mistaken. And so I really think this is a huge move. Just because, one, I think I'm surprised that a lot of people really didn't go for it, but I also think it's the cap
Mhm.
that really messed things up as far as Will Fuller's status, along with the 6 game suspension. But what he was
Yeah.
doing last year was really impressive, considering there was
Hmm.
no DeAndre Hopkins, and you finally got the year that he was healthy, and so he was able
Yeah.
to see everything. So Watkins and not Watkins, Watson and
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, they were actually able to do something. It was kind of the only way that Houston could stay in games. Like he really
Yeah.
showed that he could be a full receiver to where I would say, to be honest with you, I think he might be wide receiver one in Miami over Devontae Parker. And then now with Jalen Waddle, in my defense of Will Fuller here, he is still a home run threat. Like he never stopped that. That's what he got kind of got
Hmm.
shoehorned into in Houston. And if you
Yeah,
really
because
think,
that was the kind of their passing attack,
yeah,
was
it
just
was,
him.
yeah,
That's it.
unfortunately, Bill O'Brien was the head coach then.
Yeah.
But like, if you really think about how I think Miami's going to attack this, is if they're going to go all in on Tua, then they're really going to go into more of a spacing kind of
Hmm.
like passing concepts, and that's where if Will Fuller can get either one on one or he can beat people in space, and so I think not only him, but I mean they have Jalen Waddle as well, but especially Will Fuller, I think he can be a big addition to Tua.
I agree. I agree. And with the level of talent that they have, I think it'll take some of the pressure off of Will Fuller. He had had a lot of mid grade talent around him when he was in Houston. That last year, of
Wide
course.
receiver three, I
After
think, was Kiki Kuti, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken, and so
yeah, and
now wide receiver
he
three is
just
Jalen
struggled.
Waddle.
Yeah, and he struggled, and now I think with the amount of talent that he has on the wide receiver core down in Miami, and with Tua at behind center, I think it's going to be a different game for him, and it'll be interesting to see how he adapts because I could see him going to wide receiver one and Devontae Parker getting bumped down, but I could also see him being surpassed by Jalen Waddle. So you never know. He is a more experienced back, but he's kind of reaching the end of his term, I think, as a top wide receiver, just with how old he's getting.
What's
So,
hilarious is that in more often it kind of just begun for Will Fuller
mhm,
too. But I think when it comes to
yeah,
this year, as far as free agency signings, I mean, to me, he's number five because he can be the number one or he could be the number three. Like, and
yeah,
it's not like Miami paid him a lot to be either or. It's really we're just going to see how you play. Plus,
yeah.
he's suspended week one if I'm not mistaken. With
He's
the
suspended for a couple weeks, I thought.
Yeah, so if you are going to look at Will Fuller, understand he will be suspended for the next couple
Yeah,
of weeks. So
you're gonna
that's
miss out on quite a few weeks from him.
yeah.
So
All right, Ryan. Who is your number four free agents acquisition?
my number four is Corey Linsley. So I think that he'll significantly improve that offense. The Chargers were in desperate need of a very good center, and really just they're in a rebuild almost of their entire offensive line. They're really trying to center their offense around their QB Justin Herbert because he's young talent, fresh off the draft. He did great last year. I think that they're really trying to build up a protection for him. So getting somebody that protected Aaron Rodgers for 7 years, he's really going to provide almost an insurance for Justin Herbert and really help out that O line. He's going to be a bright star on that O line.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And he's actually number three on my list as well. I just think
Mm-hmm.
it's you see how good Herbert can be, and that was literally his first year. And
Yeah.
nothing helps a young quarterback more than a veteran O line that knows what's going on, that knows the different like stunts and like schemes that a
Yep.
defensive coordinator can throw out. And so that's just only going to accelerate Herbert's development. And I really think from a fantasy perspective, this helps everyone. Literally, like
Yep.
It'll help pass protection, run blocking, like so Eckler, Keenan Allen, Herbs.
Yeah.
Um, I would even go as far to say even Mike Williams, Justin Guyton. That's
Yeah. Yeah, of
such a
course.
huge help.
And that's why, like, my philosophy has always been, I played on the offensive line in high school. I never played any college ball, but you know, my philosophy has always been your offense starts at the line. If you don't have a good offensive line, you don't have pass protection, so you can't throw the ball really well. Unless you're dinking and dunking it and you're able to, get off, little passes or whatnot. Your run game suffers, affects the entire offense. So if you do not have a solid offensive line, you really don't have a very good football team, to be honest. Like, and that's why the Vikings, my team, I was really hoping that they would like very invest heavily in their offensive line because that's the foundation. That's where they need to start. So,
Well, I think
I
you
think
you
they
just
took a.
brought up a
Oh,
very good point. And
mhm,
that's as far as like, well, this is a fantasy podcast. Why are we talking
yeah,
about a center? Well, you
yeah,
have to understand how that like decision reverberates and how the impact goes farther than just the position itself.
of course,
And
yeah. And there's any position affects the fantasy performance for the entire team. Because really, if you have a bad offensive line, then your offense doesn't do very well. You can't get the run game going, you can't get the pass game going. Well, then your offense is on there for a 3-and-out. Then your defense is on the field for a majority of the game. That's going to wear them down. That's going to make them either be injured or just completely just worn down to nubs by the end of the game. And that's going to affect your team as an overall unit. So everything, it just goes back to another position. It all just trickles down.
alrighty, so for my number four, I mean, obviously now you guys know Corey Lindsley is Ryan's four, and my number three. My number four is actually another receiver, being Curtis Samuel. Now, I think Curtis Samuel is one of the kind of the great almost mysteries of the NFL because he's actually a really dynamic running back and receiver like combo in that
Yep.
regard. I mean, obviously he fit within the Urban Meyer system really well at Ohio State when he was there, but he now goes to a team that he knows the playbook already. Washington's current offensive coordinator Scott Turner, who was the former offensive coordinator under Ron Rivera at
Hmm.
Carolina, and so that familiarity I think is very huge and brings it to the receiver room. Plus, you have a a quarterback, either Ryan Fitzpatrick or Taylor Heineke, who I think cannot be worse than Dwayne Haskins or unfortunately a as great as he did play, like I think they'll be way better than Alex Smith. And so I think you have the familiarity. I think you pair him up with a cast of Logan Thomas and Antonio Gibson and last but not least, Terry McLaurin. And I think you have the recipe of having a really, really good like season coming up for Curtis Samuel. And I think kind of like part of the issue almost was just there was three major receivers there as a brand new offense COVID year, and that new coaching staff just had to figure out, all right, how do we use Curtis Samuel? Well, now you go to a coach who knows how to use Curtis Samuel, so I think this is going to be a very good season for him.
Yeah, and that transitions perfectly into who my number three is.
Which is
Curtis
Samuel.
Samuel.
So
So yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said. The transition from an offense where he was being utilized, uh, but he's being transitioned into an offense where like they really know how to use him. So he's a very versatile, um, very utility wide receiver. He can line up in the backfield. He can run. He can do screens. He can pretty much do anything, and he's going to be. I think he's going to be a very very good weapon that the Washington football team is going to use, and they've needed a solid wide receiver too, um, for probably
Forever.
the last couple of years. Uh, but having Curtis Samuel behind Terry McLaurin, and then having Adam Humphries being their third string, I think the trio there, it's a solid wide receiver set. Um, they need to add a little more depth, but when it comes to Curtis Samuel, they really did the right thing in picking him up. So yeah, I think that's just oh great.
And I think that's also important to know, especially within dynasty purposes. Even if the quarterback isn't good next year, they'll be set up for a quarterback next year, and then you put
Yeah,
either Heineke is the guy, or you get someone new, and they're already paired with Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin,
yeah,
so they're already ready to go. They're way more win now than a lot of people
yeah.
gave them credit for, even 2 years ago.
Well, I mean, they have Fitz Magic on their team. Come on, they're gonna go all the way to the Super Bowl with him.
Fitz, all right. Let me just start off with this because I'm gonna just say
Uh,
I
there's no
think
sarcasm in my voice at all,
yeah,
huh?
yeah. I ain't gonna lie, he actually exceeded my expectations because I was just waiting for him to fail
Yeah.
last year. And because you always get the
Mhm.
three magic games, and then it's like, oh no, which one
Yeah,
do you not
exactly.
start him in? But no, he actually played really well last year. I guess. I mean, with this, with he in Washington now, he's just kind of competing. Like it's not so much a hey, we got
Yeah.
this guy waiting, he's going to be there. I mean, Taylor Heineke's also not young either. Like he's still like
Hmm.
27, 28, so he's not a rookie. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a true quarterback battle, which I think could be a
Yeah.
really like fun thing to look at
Yeah.
for the
And
year.
Fitzpatrick's always been kind of a filler quarterback. He's he's a journeyman, obviously, but he'll fit for the time being until they can draft a quarterback for the future. So he's always been used for that. At least the last like three teams that he's gone to, the Bucks, Miami, and now, you know, where he's at in Washington. So he's always been used as just a filler. So yeah.
So
Um,
I was going to tell you what your number two is, but I think since we have the same number two, we might as well just say who it is. And that's going
yeah,
to be guard Joe Thuney, who signed a
exactly.
mega deal as an offensive guard to Kansas City, which I believe is 6 years, 80 million. Someone correct me if I am wrong, but that is a lot of
That
money
is a lot
to
of
dole out
money.
to a guard. And after the Super Bowl performance, I don't blame Kansas City
No, I don't blame them
because you get
whatsoever.
one of the best guards in the game right now.
Yeah, he's going to be utilized there. They've had a very a very rough go when it comes to their offensive line. Obviously, I went I went through the ringer, when it came to the Corey Linsley, and I went through my whole philosophy on how
And I think it
the
still applies
the
when it
line
comes to Joe
is
Thuney here.
exactly. It is the same thing. It starts from the line, and it shows their Super Bowl performance. They were riddled uh, with injury, weren't they? They were missing like two
Yes.
linemen.
So not just that. So you start off from the very beginning. Your starting right guard decides to not to opt out of the
Yeah,
year. Who will come back this year? Duvernay Tardif. I can't remember his first name for
yeah,
the life of me. You
yeah.
then
Is it Devin?
Yes, Devin
Devin
Duvernay
Duvernay.
Tardif.
Yeah.
Yes. And so then you lose Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher right before the Super Bowl. And that's where
Oh,
it went downhill. So Mike Remmers was your starting left tackle. But the problem with that is like you can't just teach someone the playbook in like the
yeah,
biggest game of the year. There was no way to do that. With Joe Thuney there and Tardif coming back, so your interior O line is set. And there's another person who they
yeah,
drafted that will fill up too as well.
yeah. And I think this is just really needed for them. So I think their offensive line struggled a lot last year throughout the most of the year. So having that protection, having that extra, interior lineman there who is just as solid can be for a guard, I think that just gives Mahomes that insurance or that assurance that he's going to be protected.
And I
because you
think
paid a lot of money for him. You got to keep him protected.
I mean, not only Mahomes, but I think this helps Clyde Edwards-Helaire a lot too, because I would
Yes.
say even from the get-go, like their O-line just did not have the same push as the year before, and I do
Yep.
think not having Tardif there and having like those issues really showed it's like, hey, we need to get someone to like push the ball because Mahomes can only do so much. While he can do basically almost everything from the quarterback position, they needed a run game, and they signed Le'Veon Bell
Yep.
for that specific reason.
I think he's going to do really well. It'll be really fun to see him doing what he does best. Protecting the stars.
Yeah, and speaking of doing what he does best, the New York Giants paid our number one person on this list, which is
Uh,
going to be Kenny Galladay signed a 4-year,
and
$72 million deal. Huge money considering we have a cap that's actually lower than usual at 182 million. But I think the
yeah,
first thing that immediately comes to mind regarding the Kenny Galladay signing is Daniel Jones has his number one, and so now
yes,
when it comes to Daniel Jones, there are no excuses. But
nope,
I think Kenny Dolly is a great possession receiver considering who they have there. Like someone that can like get Daniel Jones out of like a tough situation as he's like it's like 3rd and 5 and I need a 6-yard completion and oh look there's Kenny Galladay out in the corner.
yeah,
Let me just throw it one on one. That's such a great skill set to have and he's such a physical receiver. Like he fits the Giants really well. The only
yeah,
thing, in my opinion, that really is going to stop him now on the field will be injuries. In fantasy, however, I think we need to start talking about how loaded the Giants are and how much they really changed it up for them this year because as much as Kenny Galladay is our number one receiver, we do have to talk about the probability that he won't get the same points like he was in Detroit.
Well, I agree completely because first of all, you don't have Matthew Stafford there. it's
Yeah,
it's Daniel Jones. He's a decent quarterback, but I don't think he is Matthew Stafford. I kind of compared this move to Diggs going to the Bills almost. It's some comparison. I think what happened there is going to happen here, but that's just me. A lot of people, see this as Galladay's last trip, and he's pretty much being sent off to die in in New York. But I think I think he's going to revamp the offense for the Giants and just allow that deep threat, that possession deep threat where Daniel Jones can just throw it up there and let Galladay come down with it. But it's all
so man, so
you
what if
have
I
to wait
threw?
for it.
Yeah,
So
so
it
let me
may
throw this at you:
yeah.
is how high do you put Kenny Galladay up now? Because I feel like the addition of Kenny Galladay
Yeah.
makes Daniel Jones go up a little bit with his
Mhm.
supporting cast, but I think this might be a situation where everyone actually takes a hit a little bit.
I think everybody goes up or goes down except for Daniel Jones, just because they're going to have to rework some of the offense. I think they brought in Kenny Galladay for a reason, and I think it's because it wasn't working how they were doing it. So they're still going to have Saquon Barkley very heavy in the run game and the pass game when it comes to screens and flats and all of that. So I think they're going to try to stretch out the offense a little more and make it to where they can throw a little farther down the field. But I I think it's gonna go well for them.
I personally am under the impression that I don't think Kenny Galladay may hit the same numbers. He may be a little bit more touchdown dependent than what
Mhm.
we're going to be leading on. I mean, if you think about it, you have Saquon, you have Darius Slayton, and Sterling Shepard, who I think those two receivers were probably going to take the biggest hit with the
Yeah,
addition of John Ross, and even on top of that, the first round pick Kadarius Toney. So there
yeah,
are a huge amount. Oh, not huge. There are so many receivers that are in there, not including Kyle Rudolph as another tight end as well. So to where
Yeah.
it's very crowded in there. So personally for me, I'm only if Kenny Galladay, it may be in the seventh, eighth round, but if someone's thinking second or third, that I actually might pass on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't answer your question at the beginning of that. I apologize. I don't know where I'd put him because I don't quite trust him in this new system. I don't know whether it's going to be good for him or whether it's going to be really bad because they do have a lot to, or Daniel Jones has a lot of different people to throw to now. Um, I really don't know where he's going to end up in that. I would still put him probably as a mid to high grade wide receiver too. If he does get the amount of targets that he should as their wide receiver one. But again, I won't know it until I see it, and until I see probably a couple of games of him being a solid wide receiver one for the Giants, it's all up in the air, especially when it comes to like trades like this or like free agent pickups like this.
So Kenny Galladay, top 15 fantasy wide receiver. No,
Nah,
to
nah.
me, I think he's 14.
Ugh.
Like I
See, that
like
just scares
you.
me putting it because it's unknown. It scares me putting him that high.
Oh, dude, it terrifies me because, like you, I'm like, you know what? I can see wide receiver 8. I can see wide receiver 14. I
Yeah.
can also see wide receiver 28.
Well, and see, that's why I compared him to the Stephon Diggs move to the Bills because people were really low after his trade to the Bills. Um, I remember I picked him up in the third round or the fourth round of last year's draft in a redraft format. I was so surprised to see him go that far. Like there was a lot of like questionable wide receivers taken before him, and I was super surprised to see Diggs that low. And then he ended up being one of the top wide receivers. So it could be this could be another situation where Galladay comes in and he's an underdog and he ends up getting so many targets and is just so good. But then the other side of the coin is he flops and he ends up, getting beat out for the number one wide receiver position for some reason. So it could go either way.
In a draft, if you had the option of Kenny Galladay or Tyler Lockett, who do you pick?
I don't trust the consistency when it comes to Tyler Lockett. He is severely hit or miss. I I don't like Tyler Lockett. I I really don't. I would go Galladay just because I know he's got the skill set, and I think it's kind of a make it or break it type thing. But if I was just those two, I would pick Galladay. That's
Yeah,
my
I would
choice.
personally pick Galladay in that
Yeah,
situation as well.
just I don't trust Lockett. I never have. I've seen his stats year to year, and it's either he has a 40-point game or he has a 5-point game. I don't like that in a wide receiver. I don't like it in a running back. I don't like it in any any position. That kind of inconsistency. It's great for fun, if you have a flex that you can't put anybody else in, throw in Tyler Lockett. You may get a game where he makes your week and has 40 points. But in a league where I have a lot of skill players that are more consistent. I'd rather have a very consistent set of wide receivers that score 15 to 20 points than a wide receiver that could score 40 points one week and 5 points the next.
And then 9 or 8 points the next couple
Yeah.
weeks.
Exactly. I like consistency in my team on my roster. I value consistency.
Hi everyone, Josh from the future here. If you're wondering where our coaches and trade segment went, well, don't be alarmed. Ryan and I talked so long that we had to split it up into two episodes. Our next episode will be talking about coaches and trades, and then we also have our episode about the NFL draft coming up. As always, find us on the Sleeper app at the Last Place Fantasy Football Podcast and on YouTube at the Last Place Fantasy Football Podcast. See you soon.